The United Terran Coalition's first contact protocol was a masterpiece of bureaucratic preparation. It was a 3,000-page document bound in blue synthetic leather, compiled by the finest minds in sociology, linguistics, xenobiology, and interstellar law. It covered everything from high-gravity cellular degradation to the polite way to decline eating a host's still wriggling ceremonial larvae. It did not, however, include a single section on how to maintain a straight face. Captain Jonathan Vance sat in the command chair of the UNS Vanguard, a heavy exploration cruiser floating on the edge of the uncharted sector designated as Sector 84. His hand was firmly clamped over his mouth, his thumb and forefinger pinching his nose so hard his face was turning a dangerous shade of crimson. His chest was heaving in short, silent spasms. On the main view screen, a high-definition transmission from the supreme flagship of the Vornic Hegemony was playing out. The Vornic had discovered humanity's forward listening post 3 days prior, and instead of opening trade negotiations, they had requested an immediate, secure channel for what their automated translation software called the official Subjugation Audition. The alien commander on screen was trying very hard, with a desperate, exhausting amount of effort, to look like a nightmare incarnate. He was a reptilian humanoid, roughly 7 feet tall, but his actual biological form was almost entirely obscured by an armor set covered in so many jagged, unnecessary, and wildly impractical spikes that he looked less like a galactic conqueror and more like an aggressive space porcupine that had survived a crash into a cutlery factory. The armor was painted a matte, light-absorbing black, but it was heavily scratched, suggesting the commander frequently got stuck in automatic doors. Behind him, the bridge of the Vornic flagship was lit entirely in an aggressive, deep, blood-red neon glow. It was clearly designed to look ominous, but from a practical engineering standpoint, it was a disaster. The illumination was so poor that the human crew could clearly see the alien bridge technicians in the background squinting, leaning within 2 inches of their monitors, and occasionally rubbing their eyes in sheer physical discomfort. "Tremble, fragile, moisture-filled bipeds," the Vornic commander bellowed. His voice was heavily modulated through an artificial synthesizer designed to add a deep, demonic, gravelly echo that resonated in the sub-bass frequencies. Unfortunately, the tech department of the Hegemony had clearly neglected their audio balancing software. Every time the commander hit a high vowel, the synthesizer clipped violently, resulting in a high-pitched, comical squeak that sounded exactly like a stepped-on rubber duck. "I am Overlord Malakar the Unforgiving," the commander continued, completely unaware of the squeak. "We are the shadow that consumes the stars. We are the cold wind that extinguishes the light of civilization. We eat the bone marrow of our enemies, and we bathe in the literal tears of 1,000 conquered worlds." To emphasize this grand, terrifying declaration, Malakar raised his massive, spiky gauntlet and slammed his fist down onto his command console. It was meant to be a dramatic exclamation point. However, due to the massive, oversized spikes protruding from his elbow, he misjudged his own turning radius. His elbow caught a secondary lever, which instantly activated an emergency theatrical smoke machine hidden beneath his chair. Thick, chemical, bright purple smog erupted directly into Malakar's face. The terrifying overlord instantly lost all composure, bending double and coughing violently. "Grack! Cough! Grack! I told you to disable the wheeze, the theatrical exhaust during live feeds. It's burning my secondary eyelids." On the bridge of the UNS Vanguard, the silence was absolute. It was a heavy, fragile, agonizing silence. 25 highly trained, decorated Space Fleet officers were currently engaged in the hardest battle of their military careers, the fight against their own diaphragm. Communications Officer Maya Chin was shaking so violently that her headset was rattling against her temple. She had her teeth buried deep into her own lower lip, and a single tear of pure, unadulterated agony was rolling down her cheek. Vance glanced sideways at her, his own voice cracking as he whispered through gritted teeth. "Hold it together, Chen. We represent Earth. Do not blow this." "Sir!" Chen choked out, her voice a tiny, strained squeak that rivaled the alien synthesizer. Should I tell them their purple smoke machine is on a 5-second loop? Or do we just let them suffocate?" Before Vance could answer, Malakar re-emerged from the purple cloud. His yellow eyes were bloodshot and watering, and his spiky helmet was slightly crooked, tilting ridiculously to the left. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his demonic posture, though the red neon lights made the lingering purple smoke look like a cheap disco from the 1980s. "Your doom is sealed," Malakar wheezed, his voice changer squeaking on the word doom. "Within 3 planetary rotations, our unstoppable world crusher fleet will enter your local space. You will bow before the hegemony, or your primitive world will be reduced to cosmic dust and memories. What say you, humans? Do you beg for mercy, or do you choose annihilation?" Vance took a deep, centering breath. He pressed his palms flat against his armrests, forced his facial muscles into a mask of solemn professionalism, and leaned forward. "Overlord Malakar," Vance said, his voice remarkably steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We receive your highly enthusiastic greeting. The United Terran Coalition takes all first contact scenarios very seriously. However, before we discuss the logistical details of our total annihilation and the Boeing, our engineering team has a few immediate questions regarding your presentation." Malakar blinked his massive reptilian eyes. The crooked helmet shifted further to the left. "Questions? You dare question the harbingers of your destruction?" "Yes, just 2 quick ones," Vance said, nodding politely. "First, we noticed that your armor has approximately 47 external spikes. How do your crew members walk down tight corridors without accidentally stabbing each other during red alerts? And second, is the blood red lighting mandatory for your computers? Or do you all just hate having functional eyesight? Because look behind you." Malakar turned his head. Thanks to the wide-angle lens of the human view screen, the entire human bridge watched as a lizard-like alien technician in the background, carrying a heavy metallic tray of what looked like glowing, decorative skulls, tripped over a thick black cable that was completely invisible in the dim red lighting. The technician went flying. The glowing skulls clattered loudly across the metal floor. In a panic, another officer rushed to help, but his own spiky shoulder pads got tangled in a hanging banner of despair, bringing the entire curtain structure crashing down on top of them. To make matters worse, a loud, pre-recorded audio track of agonized, screaming souls began to play through the Vornic communication array. It was clearly a sound effect meant to be triggered during Malakar's most intimidating lines, but the technician had accidentally smashed his face into the soundboard during the fall. Malakar's face turned a dark, bruised shade of green. He frantically waved his hands at the camera. "Cut the feed! Cut the transmission! Grack, turn off the souls! Turn off the souls!" The view screen snapped to a static black logo of a bleeding sword. The bridge of the UNS Vanguard instantly collapsed into pure, unbridled chaos. Officer Chen fell entirely out of her ergonomic chair, curling into a ball on the floor as she shrieked with laughter. The navigation officer was slamming his forehead repeatedly against his console, gasping for air. Captain Vance threw his head back, letting out a booming, roaring laugh that echoed off the metallic walls of the bridge, his tears flowing freely now. "They are a parody," Vance gasped, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "They are a literal, live-action space opera parody from a low-budget movie theater. Oh my God, someone tell me we recorded that." "Every single frame, sir," the the tactical officer wheezed, clutching his stomach. It's already saving to the Central Archive. Chapter 2. The Viral Terran War. Over the next 2 weeks, the Vornic Hegemony attempted to wage a psychological war of terror against the human race. They did this by hijacking civilian subspace communication frequencies and broadcasting terrifying, pre-recorded manifestos directly into human homes. It was a strategy that had worked flawlessly on 24 other species across the Orion Arm. The pacifist elves of Centauri had surrendered within hours of seeing a Vornic dreadnought. The avian diplomatic corps of Vega had wept at the sight of Malakar's spiky gauntlets. Humanity, however, did not weep. Humanity opened up video editing software. Within 48 hours of the first terror broadcast, the internet infrastructure of Earth and her colonies had completely absorbed the Vornic hegemony into its cultural ecosystem. Human teenagers took Malakar's high-pitched voice changer squeaks and remixed them into high-tempo electronic dance music. The clip of the technician tripping over the decorative skulls was turned into a viral, infinite-loop GIF, used to describe corporate incompetence. When Malakar gave a speech threatening to grind human bones into bread, an enterprising bakery chain in New Berlin launched a new line of crusty, skull-shaped sourdough loaves called Malakar's Despair. They sold out in 3 hours. Overlord Malakar became an overnight internet celebrity. He had an official fan club on Earth before his fleet even crossed the Kuiper Belt. Meanwhile, aboard the Vornic flagship the Devastator, morale was at an all-time low. "What do you mean they are making memes out of me?" Malakar roared, his voice changer squeaking aggressively on the word memes. He was sitting on his grand throne of black iron, which was incredibly uncomfortable because the lower spikes of his backplate kept wedging themselves into the gaps of the metal cushions, locking him in place. His chief administrative officer, Grak, a tired-looking alien who had given up wearing his spiky helmet because it gave him chronic migraines, held a human-manufactured tablet. "Sir, it appears to be a form of psychological counter-warfare," Grak explained, rubbing his temples. "Or, they genuinely don't care. Look at this. This is a digital broadcast channel called TikTok. There are currently 12 million human children performing a synchronized dance where they pretend their elbows are covered in sharp metal while a synthesized voice squeaks in the background. They call it the Malakar Shuffle." Malakar stared at the screen. He watched a human teenager in a kitchen perfectly mimic his posture, complete with a makeshift purple smoke machine made from a domestic toaster. "Why aren't they trembling, Grak?" Malakar asked, his voice suddenly dropping its gravelly tone, sounding genuinely hurt and confused. "When we approached the Gliese Republic, their planetary council fell to their knees and offered us their mineral rights before we even finished our opening monologue. We are the hegemony. Our hulls are painted with the charcoal of burnt biomes." "Well, sir," Grak said, sighing deeply as he pulled up a financial spreadsheet, "I've been analyzing human data, and I think we have a larger structural problem. Humanity is a post-scarcity, highly advanced military democracy. They don't look at our ships and see demons. They look at our ships and see bad engineering." Grak tapped the screen, bringing up a blueprint of their flagship. "Human defense analysts have published a public review of our fleet on their open networks. They gave our flagship 2 out of 5 stars. 2 stars? Malakar gasped, outraged. "The Devastator is a monument to cosmic terror." "Yes, sir, but the human engineers pointed out that our external plasma throwers are completely useless because fire cannot burn in a vacuum. They also noted that the giant decorative ramming horns on our bow add 12,000 tons of dead weight, which severely compromises our sublight acceleration. And they noticed that our bridges have no windows, no emergency blast shutters, and our interior lighting is so dim that our crew's productivity has dropped by 42% due to accidental falls." Malakar slumped back into his throne, a loud clack echoing as his armor spikes wedged themselves into the iron frame again.
"Damn it! I'm stuck! Grak, pull me forward!"
Grak sighed, grabbed Malakar's gauntlet, and pulled with all his might until the Overlord popped loose with a metallic screech. "Sir," Grak said quietly, "the human fleet has just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. They aren't deploying shields. They are sending a wideband audio invitation." Chapter 3: The Battle of the Red Light. The Vornic World Crusher fleet consisted of 50 massive, jagged warships, each one designed to look like a predatory sea monster from an ancient Vornic myth. They were black, covered in spikes, and emitted a constant, low-frequency hum intended to induce nausea in biological organisms. Facing them was a fleet of 30 United Terran Coalition vessels. The human ships were sleek, practical, and painted a clean, reflective white. They looked like a collection of high-tech scientific laboratories equipped with massive railgun batteries. They did not have spikes. They did not have decorative skulls. They had optimal geometry and redundant shielding systems. Aboard the Vanguard, Captain Vance looked at the tactical display. The Vornic fleet had formed a massive, complex wall formation that looked very cinematic, but left their flanks completely exposed to long-range kinetic bombardment. "Open a channel to their flagship," Vance commanded. "Let's use the frequency we fixed for them." On the bridge of the Devastator, Malakar's main console chimed. The deep, static-heavy red light suddenly flickered, and a crisp, perfectly balanced audio feed came through. The annoying, high-pitched squeak was gone, replaced by a smooth, mathematically clean filter. "Overlord Malakar, this is Captain Vance of the UTC," the human voice said, sounding entirely too cheerful for someone facing a world-crushing armada. "We noticed your fleet formation. It looks very impressive from the front. Excellent symmetry. However, our tactical computers indicate that if we fire a single kinetic slug at your lead ship's decorative horn, the structural vibration will likely snap your forward sensor array like a dry twig." Malakar froze, looking at Grak. Grak checked his datapad and slowly nodded, covering his face with his hand. It was true. The horns were attached directly to the main sensor housing because the designers thought it looked metal. "Furthermore," Vance continued, "we would like to propose an alternative to a traditional space battle. We know your crews have been living under red fluorescent lights for months, and frankly, our medical scans indicate that your entire fleet is suffering from severe vitamin D deficiency and extreme physical fatigue. We have a diplomatic station over Geneva, Switzerland. We have fresh fruit, bright sunlight, and excellent coffee. We would like to invite your command staff down for a lunch to discuss trade agreements, and perhaps a redesign of your uniforms." Malakar looked around his bridge. The air was thick with the faint smell of sulfur from the dramatic smoke machines. 2 of his officers were currently wearing neck braces because the heavy, spiky helmets had strained their cervical vertebrae during a minor evasive maneuver yesterday. The navigation officer was literally using a magnifying glass to read his instrument panel because the red light was so low. "Grak!" Malakar whispered, turning his head slowly. "If we fight them, what are our actual chances?" Grak pulled up a simulation. "Sir, their railguns can fire projectiles at 0.02 C. Our decorative armor plating is made of heavy iron alloy, which looks terrifying but has 0 resistance to kinetic impact. We would be turned into glowing shrapnel before our plasma throwers even reached effective range. Plus, the humans have already trademarked your name. If we die as a historical footnote in a comedy routine." Malakar stared at his console. He looked at his spiky hands. He felt a sharp pain in his lower back, where the armor plate had been digging into his spine for the last 6 hours. "Grak," Malakar said softly, "do the humans really have coffee?" "According to their database, sir, yes." and a substance called croissants, which are light, fluffy, and completely devoid of spikes. Malakar took a long, deep breath. He reached up, unbuckled the heavy, jagged chin strap of his helmet, and lifted the massive black structure off his head. He set it down on the console with a loud, final thud. Without the helmet, he looked much smaller, slightly rounder, and incredibly tired. "Connect me to the human captain," Malakar said. Tell him we accept the invitation. But only if I don't have to wear this damn suit to the restaurant." Chapter 4. The Dictator Tax. The peace conference in Geneva was not held in a dark, ominous hall of judgment. It was held in a beautiful glass-walled pavilion overlooking a crystal blue lake, surrounded by green trees and bathed in the warm, natural light of Earth's sun. Malakar arrived wearing a loose, comfortable, light gray civilian jumpsuit provided by the human diplomatic corps. It was made of soft, organic cotton, had no metal components, and most importantly, it allowed him to sit down without threatening his own life. Captain Vance met him at the entrance. Wearing his standard white and blue dress uniform, he extended a hand. "Overlord Malakar. Or do you prefer just Malakar now?" "Just Malakar is fine," the alien said, his voice now natural, smooth, and lacking any demonic modulation. He shook Vance's hand, surprised by the warmth of the human grip. "The Overlord title carries a lot of administrative baggage. You wouldn't believe the amount of paperwork required to maintain an empire of fear." They sat down at a long wooden table laden with fresh pastries, fruits, and steaming carafes of black coffee. Malakar picked up a croissant, inspected it for hidden spikes, and took a bite. His yellow eyes widened. "By the ancestors," Malakar whispered, chewing happily. It's soft. Everything in the hegemony is sharp. Our food is intentionally jagged to promote a warrior spirit. It regularly lacerates our gums. That sounds incredibly counterproductive to digestive health," Vance said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Which brings me to our proposal. We've been reviewing the economic structure of the Vornic Hegemony. Malakar, you are spending nearly 65% of your gross planetary product on aesthetics." Grak, who was sitting next to Malakar and wearing a similarly comfortable human shirt, nodded aggressively. "I have been saying this for 3 dynasties. The Overlord wouldn't listen." "It was tradition," Malakar defended himself, though his mouth was half full of pastry. "The manual explicitly states that a conqueror must inspire dread." "Yes, but look at the cost breakdown," Vance said, sliding a digital folder across the table. "You spend 40 billion credits a year on custom black paint that absorbs radar but also causes your ships to overheat because it retains solar radiation. You spend 12 billion credits on the smog of despair chemical agents, which are classified as a toxic workplace hazard by our standards, and your military recruitment is plummeting because nobody wants to wear armor that prevents them from scratching their own backs." Malakar stared at the data. The human analysts had broken down the Vornic economy with brutal, mathematical precision. "We call it the dictator tax," Vance explained kindly. "When you run an empire based entirely on fear, intimidation, and subjugation, your overhead costs are unsustainable. You have to spend half your budget just keeping your own people terrified enough to obey, and the other half trying to look scary to your neighbors. It's an incredibly expensive way to run a society." "And what is the human alternative?" Malakar asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious. "Cooperation," Vance said. "Open markets, mutual defense pacts. You stop spending money on spikes and skull decals, and you start spending it on efficient FTL drives, agricultural research, and better lighting for your technicians. We don't want to conquer you, Malakar. We want to trade with you. We want to buy your raw iridium reserves, and in exchange, we can help you retrofit your fleet so your ships don't accidentally explode when they turn too fast." Malakar looked out the glass window. A group of human children was playing on the grass by the lake, laughing and chasing a robotic dog. None of them were looking at him with terror. A few of them even waved when they saw him looking. He looked back at the spreadsheet. He looked at Grak, whose face was more relaxed than it had been in 30 years. "If we stop being evil," Malakar said slowly, "what do we do with all the black paint?" "Well," Vance smiled, "we have a thriving Gothic subculture on Earth that would be happy to buy it at wholesale price." Chapter 5. The Rebrand. 1 year later, Sector 84 was the most profitable trade zone in the known galaxy. The Vornic Hegemony was gone, officially dissolved by an overwhelming vote of its own planetary councils. In its place stood the Vornic Cooperative. The warships had been recalled and systematically retrofitted. The giant ramming horns were melted down to create structural beams for new orbital medical stations. The pitch-black paint jobs were replaced with a highly visible, practical silver and blue coating that improved heat dissipation by 80%. The blood-red interior neon lights were banned by imperial decree, replaced by bright, cheery full-spectrum LED lighting that instantly cured the crew's chronic depression and eliminated 99% of workplace tripping accidents. The Vornic technicians were no longer required to carry trays of glowing skulls. They carried standard, lightweight human diagnostic tools, and their productivity soared to historic heights. Malakar did not return to military service. He discovered that he had a unique talent that was far more powerful than cosmic terror. He was naturally, hilariously funny. He remained on Earth, moving into a beautiful penthouse apartment in Tokyo. He started a digital content channel on the Terran network titled The Dread Empire's Comedy Hour. Every week, millions of humans and aliens tuned in to watch the former galactic conqueror sit in a comfortable armchair, wearing a colorful Hawaiian shirt, and review classic sci-fi movies, pointing out how horribly impractical the villains' secret bases and costumes were. "Look at this guy," Malakar would roar during his broadcasts, pointing his green finger at a holographic screen showing a fictional alien warlord with giant shoulder pads. "He can't even raise his arms above his shoulders. If you throw a ball at his head, he dies. And the lighting. Why is it always red? You can't see the keyboard, Carol. How are you supposed to launch the Doomsday Missile if you can't see the Enter key?" The studio audience, a mix of humans, Vornic, and other species, would erupt into helpless laughter. Malakar would lean back, taking a sip of iced coffee from a giant mug that read, "World's okayest Overlord." He was no longer feared. He no longer commanded an armada of world-crushing dreadnoughts. He didn't have a single spike left to his name. But as he listened to the genuine, joyful laughter filling the room, he realized that Vance had been completely right. Cooperation was definitely cheaper than terror, and it paid a whole lot better.